Right, I think we'll start, guys. It's bang on past. Thanks for joining me. I don't know about you guys, but what could be better than on a rainy Thursday morning in Manchester come together to talk about Brexit? Only this isn't so much about Brexit, the politics. This is more about how we respond to Brexit and how we address some of the workforce challenges. So this isn't a debate around some of the politics. It's more about the practicalities. So just to get that clear, I called the presentation Brexit, Flexit and the Future of Jobs, and I'll explain why, but a play in 3 acts is what I have for you this morning. In terms of background, so the Good Recruitment campaign is one of the things I'll talk about, and if you want to sign up to that, just drop me a card afterwards. In terms of setting the scene, my own job at the REC is Director of Campaigns and Policy. So I guess my job is to try and connect some of the politics and the policy with what's happening in practice for you guys who are leading recruitment. So I guess you could summarize it by saying my job is to try and make sense of the political scene, which isn't always easy, as you can appreciate. In terms of the organisation I work for, the best way to summarise what we do at the REC is through a stat, actually. So about 18 months ago, we did one of these Murray polls where we asked 1,000 people a question, and we asked them, what's the most important life decision that you have to make as an individual? So is it whether to start a family? Is it whether to get married? Is it what to study, etc., etc.? And the number one thing that people said was the biggest life decision I make, 77% of people said this, is the career that I choose to do, the job that I choose to do. So it's massively important. So we, as the representative body for the recruitment sector, take that very seriously. We think if you're working in recruitment, whether it's in-house, working for agency, you have huge power to change people's lives, don't you? But any Spider-Man fans out there will know with great power comes great responsibility. Okay, so that's something we take very seriously at the REC. So all our members have to sign up to codes of practice, etc., do the right thing. We run an institute within the REC, which is, again, is becoming qualified recruiters, and that also now applies to in-house recruitment. So if you're interested to look at how you can bring your teams in to become a qualified recruiter, there's a whole stream of activity around qualifications in the recruitment space, which you can sign up to. So one of the messages, if you are using external recruiters, use an REC member, make sure that they're doing the right things, signing up to codes of practice. So that's just a little bit about us. So part 1, Brexit. So how is it impacting on jobs? What's happening on the ground? What does our jobs market data tell us, etc.? And I'm interested to get your views on some of this, so do shout out as we go through. At the REC, we do 2 reports every single month in terms of what's happening in the jobs market. So this one, the latest one, just came out this morning, actually. So hot off the press. So what it's telling us is actually, even though demand to some extent has been hit for permanent staff, the biggest challenge in reality is still one of supply, actually. It's finding enough staff to fill the vacancies. The report that came out this morning showed a slight dip in perm hiring, probably not surprising with all the uncertainty, but an increase in people's desire to hire temporary contract interim staff, which is perhaps not a surprise. Is that something that resonates with people in the room? Sort of a bit of uncertainty about perm recruitment, looking perhaps at other avenues. One of the things we try and do at the REC is be very specific in terms of where the most in-demand job roles are, because these are the ones that potentially could be impacted by Brexit. Now, you know when you do a presentation training course and they say, whatever you do, do not put too much information on a slide. Well, I kind of blew it there, but I think the idea here is we try and capture from the people that we survey what are the hardest to fill jobs. So let's see if some of you, so give me a shout out, what are the hardest to fill jobs that you've got? Just give me 4 or 5 examples. The hardest to fill roles that you guys have got. Surveyors, risk managers. Yes, I think that's on the list. Other things, hardest to fill jobs for you guys. IT, any IT? Oh, nurses. Okay, yeah, nurses. So healthcare is massive. And that is one area where Brexit is definitely, so some of our members do healthcare recruitment. So 80% fewer nurses coming over from the EU than there were pre-referendum. So that's a massively impacted sector for sure. Other examples, hardest to fill roles, your biggest nightmare. Network engineers, yes, like it. Any other examples? Chefs. You'd think of all the cooking programs, it would be fine, wouldn't you? But it is interesting. When we start coming on to the solutions for some of this, how do we attract people into sectors where we know there's massive demand? For us, it's not just about getting better at communicating the jobs. It's just thinking about why are people not coming into these sectors? So we've done some research on that. And hospitality and catering is an interesting one because people say to us, do you know what? A lot of it's about how I'm treated. I don't want to be shouted at anymore when I come into kitchen. So there is something about thinking about how people come into jobs but then stay in them. Social care is another good example. Social work. People come into it, actually, but it's unmanageable, stress, too much, gone. So there's something about looking at recruitment, but also looking at retention as well. The other piece of work we do every single month, so this is all on the website. If you're interested in getting any of the data, to support some of your internal arguments, perhaps have a look at this. This is we ask employers, not recruitment businesses, what are you planning to do? What are you planning to do in the next 3 months, next 12 months? Are you planning to hire? Are you planning to batten down the hatches, etc.? It gives us a good indication what's happening. And again, no surprise, employer confidence in the economy is wavering. To some extent, it's impacting on hiring decisions, but as I said, employers are still planning to hire on the temp side of things, looking ahead. So they're the two bits of data. One of the things we'd be keen to help you, we're happy to send some of this over to you. To what extent do you find it a challenge to make the internal case for how hard it is to recruit? Because when we've done previous events, people said, we like to have access to data because it helps to manage expectations internally about, is that resonate? Okay. So we're getting a lot more, so whenever you produce data, it costs a lot of money to produce research and data. So I'm always keen to say, how can you use it? How do we get maximum value for it? And using the data internally to make those arguments. So that list, I can say, if you've got a job you're trying to recruit for, it's on that list. So look, it's one of the hardest to fill roles out there. It's going to take a bit longer. We might have to pay a little bit more for it. So again, we're really happy for people to start using our data to make some of those arguments. This is what I was talking about in terms of hiring intentions. So flexible solutions, more and more employers are looking for that. Interesting. There's also a real need for expertise. So with our REC hat on, we ask employers, what are you looking for? If you do use an external provider, and we know some of you won't, some of you will, if you are using an external provider, what are you really looking for? And yes, it's quality of service, and that's always been nearly top, but this is quite new, actually. We're looking for expertise. If I'm an in-house recruitment team and I do use some external providers to help me, I'm looking for people who can talk to me about the sector, the region, what are the skills developments there, where are the shortages. I'm looking for people who can talk to me about external changes, like regulatory changes. New tax coming in that's going to impact on me. Do you understand it? Do you make sure that we're running a compliant recruitment supply chain, etc.? So that need for expertise is a big one. These are just some of the changes in terms of how firms are responding to staff shortages. So Brexit, there's no doubt in our view, it's increased some of the shortages, and these are just some of the responses that we're starting to see and being tracked. So looking at where you advertise, more in-house training, so retention being a big thing, increasing wages, starting salaries have been increasing month on month for nearly 2 years now across most job roles. So it's part of the response. Are our salaries competitive? But it's not the only response. And I would say this is becoming more important. What are the non-wage benefits that we can accentuate in a tight jobs market? And I heard in the previous speakers in this room talking about, flexible working is massive at the moment, so people are asking, what's the culture? What's the flexible working arrangements? A sense of purpose. So there's all sorts of things that are not wage-related which are coming into being. And investing in automation to some extent, so people are looking at, is that one of the responses that we do taking forward? So that's just the way people are responding. We do a lot looking at recruitment channels, actually. So that, again, that's changing a little bit, but not massively. For SMEs, it's still very much word of mouth. Slightly ad hoc. That's how we're going to recruit. Is that going to be the best way in the future? Possibly not. So again, the changing in channels. Most employers will use different channels, to hire in light of some of the Brexit-related shortages. Okay. And this is just some feedback. I'll talk about the Good Recruitment campaign later, but I thought I'd condense some of the feedback we've had from recent events like this and see if it resonates. So if any of this thinks, actually, that's not true, let me know. But this is just a collation of some of the recent events that we've been at and spoken at. Workforce planning issues as a board-level priority. People recognise that? That in the last 2 years, suddenly it's a board-level discussion. So we go and see employers, they're saying, do you know what? Our whole business model's under threat here. We've got a 24/7 delivery server, whatever, for example. If we can't find the staff, our business model's under threat. So suddenly the opportunity for people in recruitment to be seen as providing solutions to some of this is huge, isn't it? So I think that's really important. So that's a definite change that we've seen in the last couple of years. Making the internal case for investment in recruitment isn't easy, though. It isn't easy. So a lot of the employers who've signed up to the Good Recruitment campaign, they're trying to do things on employer brand, but they need to do it better. They need more money. And you've got to fight. In-house recruitment, you've got to fight against other departments. I mean, we need the money, not more on market. So there's all sorts of internal debates happening, which is a challenge. So employer brand, we've talked about. There is a concern amongst some, including government, when we have meetings with government ministers about, are SMEs going to be left behind? Public sector, how are you going to compete in this jobs market where there's so much demand for staff. The pressure to make change happen on inclusion is huge now, isn't it? So equal pay, I think, has focused a lot of minds. It's not good enough now just to sort of have policies in place. Are we changing the makeup of our workforce? So there's real pressure to start showing that things are changing on that. Up in the ante on the management of a contingent workforce. Why is it that employers spend so much money about it being seen to be a good place to work, and yet none of that really applies to your temporary contract flexible staffing? It doesn't make any sense. So we're starting to see a shift in that. So how do we manage our contingent workforce? If we did a survey of the temporary staff, the contractors, the freelancers working in our place of business, what would they say about us? So that's an interesting trend, I think, that will continue. An appetite for new approaches, including new technology. So there's a lot of innovation happening, which we try and collate and look through the Good Recruitment campaign. And this idea of sometimes looking external for expertise. So the Good Recruitment campaign, again, I'll flag it at the end, but if you're interested in signing up, it's a free campaign. It's basically a network, peer-to-peer network of employees who want to, on a regular basis, exchange views on good recruitment practice. The second part, Flexit. Done Brexit, Flexit. How are employers adapting? So what workforce innovations are we seeing? So I guess the Flexit part is not just flexibility in terms of staffing, but flexibility of mind. So how can we innovate and find new solutions? So this has been a big trend, this idea of flexible working from day one. So I don't know if you've seen some of the surveys. Indeed, look at, people like Indeed who do jobs boards. They look at one of the most searched things when people are looking for jobs is this job open for flexible working? And at the moment, only 10%, I think it is, jobs make it clear that it is. So you've got a real disconnect there. So this idea of flexible hiring, making it clear that you're happy to talk about flexible work from day one of a job is one of the responses that we're starting to see. So there is talk about having some sort of government kite mark you can put on job ads, etc. So I'm not sure if that's the way through, but keep an eye on it. So if you're not making it clear, that's one response that we're starting to pick up. We try and bring all this together through the Good Recruitment campaign. Again, my colleagues on stand 30, if you want more information. If you want to sign up, just drop me a card and I'll sign you up to that. And these are just some of the employers that signed up quite recently. So it's mainly big employers who'd like to get more SMEs involved. But that network gives us the kind of intel that are flagged on the previous slide. So how are employers responding to Brexit-related workforce challenges? And that was the previous slide. So what the campaign does, it gives us research, mentoring schemes. There's a peer-to-peer review mechanism, conferences, etc. Quite a lot of podcasts as well. And this is for us is massive, actually, recruitment qualifications. So within our world of recruitment, how do we ramp up the bar? How do we get more people to come and work in recruitment? That's not easy, is it? So for us, it's about ramping things up. It does a recruitment as a career, whether it's in-house, work for agency, what doesn't matter. But how do we do that? And the qualifications for us is a big step in that sort of direction. In terms of the research, there's loads on the stand if you want to grab some. That one's a very popular one, Candidate Strikes Back. We ask employers what they thought the most important thing was for candidates during their journey. Then you ask the actual candidates, and it didn't really connect. There was quite a big mismatch there. So again, if you're interested in that, go and grab a copy at the stand, The Candidate Strikes Back. This was a good one. So much at the time you hear it's about we need to cut costs of recruitment. Fair enough, everybody's got budgets. But there is something about the cost of getting recruitment wrong, isn't there? And we tried to quantify it. When you look at all the different things, so for a 40K job, 130 if you make the wrong hire in terms of the wasted money spent on training, etc., the impact that you have on teams. So again, looking to quantify the importance of good recruitment by looking at the cost of getting it wrong was one piece of research that we did. In terms of the diversity and inclusion agenda, anybody doing some really innovative stuff on inclusion and diversity that's kind of working? Any shout out? So we're not just talking a good game. Anonymized applications, that's one of the things on the list. People are doing, getting rid of not just dates of birth, not just names.
So names,
Address, gone.
Names of institutions, so universities.
Yes, university's gone. I don't care where you went to university. Yeah. So that's a definite shift. So some employers we speak to on the good, CVs, that's gone. So it tends to be more like questions we're asking, see how people respond to it. So I think there's some definite change. Any other examples? Things that are happening on inclusion, yeah.
We're trying to widen the scope of the industries that so like, we work in retail and everyone wants something from retail, but as soon as you open up the industry, a lot bigger, broad gender spectrums there.
Yeah. And there's massive issues, aren't there, in many sectors. And some of this is a long game. So I was speaking to a representative of the energy sector, and they're saying, well, we're under pressure because of gender pay. but there's only 15% women work in the sector full stop. So if we're going to make a difference at the top level, we've got to actually start at schools and getting more people into the sector more generally. So a lot of the work we try and do through the Good Recruitment campaign and at the REC is not just saying we could do this, we should do this. We like to capture examples of people are doing this now. Here's some examples. And that's one way that you drive change on that. So again, we're happy to share this piece of research we did in terms of what works on diversity and inclusion. Things are starting to happen. So again, I'm not too downbeat for people who've got things in place, but it is about making sure that it translates to real change on the ground. And part of our work at the REC, if you're interested in any of this, drop me a card, is we try and broker. So if you'll say, oh, we need to bring more older workers back in, there's some organisations doing some great work. Age UK, the Centre for Ageing Better. If you're looking at the disability agenda, this is a government scheme that we fed into, the Disability Confidence Scheme. There's all sorts of stuff out there. And part of what we try and do is help employers make sense of it. So if you're interested in this, we can plug you into these different avenues, etc. So it is about trying to broker those sort of relationships. So the channel that we're looking, we are interested in the SME angle. So even if you're a big company, if you've got a supply chain, we'd be quite happy to use some of the links we've got to flag it to your SME community. We think it's really important that the SME community isn't left behind. And we were asked by the Bayes SME Advisory Board to sort of help drive that agenda. And we're doing some work with the IOD and other organisations on that. So final section is looking ahead. So there's change happening, there's innovation happening, and one of the things we're trying to do is to drive that through the Good Recruitment campaign. The final thing is looking at the longer term game as well. And that's not always easy when you've got lots of immediate challenges. The first one is obviously Brexit, going back to that. We're like most business organisations. All you can do is plan for different scenarios, right? We do a lot about scaling up. How do you scale your business up? If there was a no deal, we'd probably have to go batten down the hatches kind of support provision for employees. So we're trying to think what we can do as support. But I think for you guys internally, this is the sort of work I guess you must be doing, right? If it goes this way, what's it going to mean for staffing? If it goes that way, what might we mean to do? So real opportunity, I think, for anybody involved in recruitment to play that almost strategic role of helping to preempt what different scenarios might mean for workforce planning. And that's just our offering and what we will do with our members. Most employers have got some sort of, they've done some impact assessment, They've put some plans in place. Not many of them have carried out their contingency plans, but things are happening on the ground. And so I think one of the takeaways from today, if you'd like, it's a good time to really get involved and think, what you can do to provide that almost strategic advice to the business. In terms of other immediate priorities, so everybody's focusing on Brexit, which is fair enough. There's other things just to be aware. And I think when you're in the recruitment space, there's what other external things might impact on my work in the next year. So an opportunity for showing real leadership within your organisation. The immigration debate continues to be massive. R35, if you're running contractors, it's very techie. We've got lots of information. I tend to outsource that to our legal team, to be honest. Apprenticeship levy, how do we make it work better? We'd like the apprenticeship levy to be a broader training and skills levy that can be used not just for apprenticeships. So again, it's trying to campaign to make things better. This one's a big one, the Good Work Plan. Anybody heard of this? The Good Work Plan? So it's the Matthew Taylor stuff. So Theresa May said, with all this gig working, 0-hour contracts, I'm not sure we need the different regulations to cover how we employ people in this country. So the Good Work Plan is interesting because in some sectors, it's not just about regulatory change, it's what matters to people when you're in work. And yes, pay is important, but it's about how does work make me feel? Okay, do I feel respected? Do I get on with people? So there's lots of things that create good work, and for us, it's a retention tool. So we're embracing this agenda around good work and trying to get better at thinking in different sectors where it's hard. How can you make the jobs better, actually? And sometimes it's little things, isn't it? How we treat each other, how we communicate, etc. So that is a big agenda. So all of these are just examples of other things out there that we need to be aware of. Looking ahead, we did some work about 18 months ago looking at the jobs market. And we started with a question saying, what will a future jobs market look like? Okay? But then we said, actually, that's the wrong question. Why don't we bring a group of people together like we've got here today and ask the question, what kind of jobs market do we want to see in the UK? It's a different question. Because then it becomes, how do you build that? How do we all come together to build a jobs market that works for business, works for people, and helps? And these are just some of the things. I won't go through all of it, but definitely things about inclusion, progression. Progression nation. We need to help more people get into work and progress in work. As we speak, the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, Amber Rudd, is at our offices in the REC talking about a new government initiative. It will be on the news tonight about progression. Because one of the lessons from Brexit, actually, is that a lot of people are in work, We haven't got an unemployment problem in this country, but people aren't getting enough money. They don't think they're getting enough opportunity to progress. So how do we dismantle that? Progression nation. So that's going to be massive for us. Education. Anybody doing some work with schools? Anybody going into schools? Yeah? How's that going? Yeah? We need to get on this, guys. We need to get on this. So if you say there's a fundamental disconnect between education and the world of work, we need to plug it in. It's not always easy, but there's organisations that help to make that happen. So we run a scheme called Future Jobs Ambassadors. Lots of sectors are doing some great stuff. Let's get on with it, and promoting recruitment as a career is not a bad thing. Skills Match, we talked about recruitment revolution, changing the way we hire in this country, being better at planning for disruption. Again, I think is a big one, and the good work agenda. So these are just some of the things we think we need to embrace to create the sort of jobs market that we want. I put this one just because it's hot off the press. This came out last week, and it's looking at the impact of automation. Are anybody you guys doing that? So what new jobs in our business are going to be created because of technology, because of automation? Anybody looking at? Yeah. What an opportunity. You know, if you're in recruitment, these are new jobs. You know, we're going to be setting the agenda. So what the OECD said is, in reality, it's not going to be about getting rid of jobs. It's going to be all these new jobs that are going to come to the fore. This quote's often used, perhaps overused, but I think it does ring true, actually, that we often underestimate the change that will occur in the long term, but we overestimate the impact in the short term. And I think there's some definite truth in that. At the REC, we've plugged into, there's a lot happening, actually, on automation, AI in recruitment. Anybody using it? Artificial intelligence to filter applications. Anybody going down that road? Some people have, and it hasn't always worked well. So there's a live debate in lots of sectors about artificial intelligence, force for good or not. Okay, so these sort of debates, I think, are good for us to plug into as well. And there's lots of technology providers out there today. It's not easy. So there's a good quote from Simon Connaughton, who's one of our members, saying the challenge is none of it's falling out. It's just, it's increasing. So all this confusion, it's hard to know where to go to get a recommendation on what sort of technology to use. And for us, in recruitment, a lot of it's going to be about this: job design, job redesign. If you think of the future for anybody working in recruitment, in-house recruitment, it doesn't matter. What an opportunity to elevate the importance of our work within organizations. So designing jobs, or creating job designs for jobs that aren't really even existing yet. Okay, so some final thoughts before we open for questions. Any questions on any of that before we start to wrap up? Any questions? Anything you violently disagree with? No. Okay, that's good. I'll take that. We want to avoid this. A total Brexit meltdown in terms of impact on the workforce. So we were just talking about immigration, weren't we, before the session. So that's one of the immediate priorities for a lot of our members, a lot of employees we speak to for the Good Recruit campaign. What do I need to do now to reassure people? So if you're interested, we're doing some work with Fragment, who's a leading law firm. The guy who runs the part we're working with was at the Home Office and knows it very well. So we've got these little practical short guides that you can send to workers which explain about settled status. Some employers are doing little sessions like this with their workers. So let us put you in front of a specialist. You can ask any questions. So I think there's a duty of care to some extent for us to reassure people. So on immigration, if you're interested in that work we're doing, Fragment, drop me a line. Looking ahead, a lot of this is about what kind of post-Brexit immigration system will we see? And we need to get on this. We need to influence it, because it's not going to be pretty unless we do try and influence it. One of the biggest challenges we always hear about the brightest and the best. Of course, we need to bring in the brightest and the best. But what about the others? What about the people working in hospitality, in all the other sectors? So there's a big, big need, I think, for the business community to come together to have a strong voice to influence that debate around immigration. Because one of the things that isn't often talked about, if you can't find enough staff, it's not good for us as businesses, right? But I'll tell you what, it's not good either for other staff. There's nothing that causes more stress in the workplace, and I think it's Mental Health Week coming up next week. There's nothing that causes more stress in the workplace than when there's not enough staff, right? And that's the same if it's you're in a hotel, you're in a restaurant, you're in an NHS trust. That's the impact. Okay, so at a time when we're all talking about how we manage stress in the workplace, if we can't find enough staff, that has massive implications. So we all want to try and avoid that by influencing the agenda and preparing as best we can. Recruitment's going to get harder. It will. Whatever we do, recruitment's going to get harder in the next few years. All we can do is get better at it, right? Which is why events like today are really important, which is why the Good Recruitment campaign, which tries to bring people together, peer-to-peer learning, again, I think will continue to be really important. And this is the challenge we all face. I know a lot of people use this slide, but it does resonate because we're all flat out busy, aren't we? We're all flat out busy, and people say, you've got to innovate, you've got to do things differently. But how do you create that space to take a step back and think, what can we do different? That's the big challenge, which is why I think taking time out to come to events like today to plug into the Good Recruitment campaign are really important and will become increasingly important as we go through. So that's it from me.